Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Quick shout out to my newest patrons, Ted Y and Timothy S. Thank you for choosing to support the channel. So, 14.3 drops, and I have a feeling a meaningful number of you are a bit disappointed with the early videos and first impressions feedback as the expectations were high, and well, it's certainly not perfect. However, since the new release notes came out, I have fallen all the way down the rabbit hole, and I truly believe that the actual focus should be on this aspect, not on what we're seeing with the real world output just yet. In short, as part of this release, Tesla did a massive, deep-seated, fundamental rewrite of a huge part of the process, meaning Tesla needs to be careful with this 14.3 release. So yes, the release notes did give us some new features, but we should not be expecting everything with 14.3. Meaning, the real impact of 14.3 is that it will now serve as a brand new foundation that Tesla can build on with more headroom. And once this new version is validated, Tesla's engineers will be able to cook, if you will, a lot faster. Jumping right into the release notes right here, Rewrote the AI compiler and runtime from the ground up with MLIR, resulting in 20% faster reaction time and improving model iteration speed. So I think most people see the 20% faster reaction time and think, okay, that's cool, let's move on, which is a huge mistake. Reason being, this AI compiler is the part of the process that takes Tesla's trained neural network FSD model from Cortex and actually translate that and condenses it down into language and code that AI 4, Hardware 3, and Tesla's inference compute can actually understand and ultimately process and execute. So that entire middle piece has been redone from the ground up. So Tesla's FSD model, these trained neural nets, are basically a huge group of very complicated matrix math. Tesla has to take all of that and basically translate it or condense it down into instructions in code that AI 4 and Hardware 3 can interpret and run. And again, the process of taking that very complicated math and translating it and condensing it down into concise, precise information for AI 4 and Hardware 3 is done by the compiler. And further, the runtime is actually the software or the code that then executes everything in real time, second by second. So the runtime will take that condensed information and the information from the cameras and then actually execute it to get the output for the vehicle. And as always, guys, everything I say in these videos is a gross oversimplification, so there is much more happening at each step. But for our purposes here, all we need to have is a high-level understanding of why this really is such a critical update. And at this point, I can already hear the criticism, oh, here we go again. Dylan's gonna overcomplicate a very minuscule aspect to try to gloss over the fact that 14.3 isn't performing up to expectations. But listen, since we got these release notes, I honestly haven't done much else other than research this in depth. But don't just take it from me. Chris Latner said, it's cool to see Tesla FSD has adopted the LLVM Foundation MLIR stack. It's quite likely that a modern compiler and runtime implementation are the breakthrough that Robotaxi and FSD have been waiting for. For those of you that don't know who Chris Latner is, well, have a look at his LinkedIn. Worked at Tesla as the VP of Autopilot Software only for 6 months, and it was back in 2017. But he led the charge in replacing the Mobileye technology with Tesla's in-house design. Then he worked at Google for a few years working on compiler and runtime support. And he's actually the founder and primary engineer of the LLVM organization, which developed the open source project Tesla is now using, MLIR. So Chris was not only the VP of Autopilot software for a time, but he's a very skilled engineer who's worked in this very specific space now for years. And he himself is calling it a breakthrough. Now, at this point in my research, I was like, okay, that's certainly something, but he is the creator of this foundation, and of course he would want to promote and highlight his open source projects and all of that. However, when you continue down the rabbit hole and actually start to learn what the compiler and the runtime actually do, you begin to see why this is such a big deal. And we all love analogies, so in a sense, this is like Tesla going from a flip phone to a smartphone. This is not just some incremental change. And my primary mission mission today is to make that argument and do so in a way that everybody can understand. So Tesla's old compiler that it had been developing in-house now for years was most likely one flat layer, meaning Tesla would have to take that very complex matrix math of the trained FSD model and then in one shot actually condense all of that and translate it into the proper code for the chip in the car for the inference, meaning there was really no separation at all between big picture high level stuff and the low picture detailed stuff. And part of the problem with a flat layer compiler like that is if a Tesla engineer wants to change one part of the instruction set, then it could break something somewhere else. But now Tesla is using MLIR, which is multi-level intermediate representation. So put simply, Tesla now has a 3-level structure, a high level, which is the big picture, a medium level, and then a low level for the very fine, precise detail. And now Tesla can run very specialized optimizations at each layer. So now if a Tesla engineer wants to change something on the high level, we'll call it layer 1, they can do that without having to rewrite and potentially break something elsewhere. Because with MLIR, that change on layer 1 can be implemented and then automatically through layer 2 and layer 3, you get new optimizations from that one change. So think of it like Tesla now having 3 hyper specialized employees, one at each layer. All of those optimizations at each step are going to compound over time. Whereas before, Tesla just had one employee trying to make all of these changes at once, and it was a more generalized employee. So just think of the trained FSD model flowing through this optimization building, if you will, and each different floor runs a set of different optimizations. So at the end of the day, you end up with a much more precise, condensed, refined model. And once the FSD model makes it through that multi-level representation process, you're going to end up with much more precise, efficient code that AI 4 and hardware 3 can run. And again, all of this is a gross oversimplification, but at each level you have specific dialects or languages that Tesla engineers can use to make those very specific custom optimizations at each level. And again, a lot of that will compound and much of it happens automagically, if you will, whereas the prior process would involve a lot more manual work, which is a big part of why Tesla moving to this new compiler and runtime setup can actually result in much faster iteration. So Tesla can go from training a new model to actually getting it deployed to vehicles much faster. And it makes sense, right? Because that entire middle portion where all of the translation happens from the trained model to the actual vehicle has been rebuilt from the ground up with an open source model that is very heavily battle tested. And there really is so much that I could talk about here, even just like Tesla's ability to hire for the new compiler, because you're going to have engineers that are already familiar with MLIR. Or how about Tesla's ability to debug the model now is going to be much better because they have a much greater look into detail at each different level rather than having one flat layer where everything is right there. So in theory, Tesla should now be able to find and spot bugs in something like minutes instead of days. And the compiler is usually the highest return on investment part of a frontier machine learning system like Tesla's FSD, because again, it's a deeply integrated layer. And we know AI 4, hardware 3, they're fixed. So the complexity of the model that Tesla can actually run and how much reasoning can be added are all limited by how efficiently the compiler can actually map all of that onto the chip. So this 20% latency reduction not only makes reaction times better, but it effectively frees up more compute, creating new headroom for larger vision encoders or more parameters or more reasoning and so on. And again, Tesla can now iterate with newly trained models a lot faster. And I cannot stress this enough, but this change is a foundational rewrite that does totally change how Tesla's neural networks, the FSD model, things like the vision encoders and the planners and the control, how those actually get compiled and ultimately executed on the in-car hardware. And this compiler step is where things things like quantization, making the model smaller, and the memory planning and sorting, and many more technical things, they all happen at this compiler stage. So this is most likely a big part of the reason Elon said 14.3 is where the last big piece of the puzzle finally lands. Not the last piece, but the last big piece. That's a crucial distinction. So literally, you don't have to read between the lines to know that there are still other pieces that need to land. We know that after seeing the early videos of 14.3. We should not be surprised. And I really have zero interest in just encouraging people for hopium's sake here. This is genuinely my read of the scenario of all of the data that we have. And even if we didn't have a major rewrite like this with 14.3, as always, we have to wait for a dot release for the new model to actually be smoothed out. We've said it many times. Just think about the first release of version 14 with all of the brake stabbing and all of the hesitation around leaves, and now it's no longer a problem. So the camping in the left lane that's back, or the hesitation around flashing red lights that we've seen with 14.3 will get worked out. And like I said, this should be the building block that will now allow Tesla and the engineers to add things with a dot release like banish, like better actually smart summon, like pothole avoidance, like more reasoning in the model, and perhaps more parameters that we still have no indication have been added. But as we talk about often, there's still so much refinement and optimization that can be done before Tesla needs to add more parameters to the model. As is one of my life sayings, more is not always better. So in short, Tesla's new AI compiler, now done with ML/IR, actually turns Tesla's trained neural network into optimized code. And then the AI runtime is the on-car software that will take that optimized code and actually run it or execute it second by second, while also factoring in all of the video feeds from the camera and all of the input data. And again, I've been focusing mostly on the compiler so far, but Tesla also rewrote the runtime, which basically is the on-car software that's facilitating everything that's actually happening. So look, I don't want to start rambling here. I'm just trying to get the point across that my research on this over the past 24 hours or so really does have me quite encouraged and excited to see what 14.3.x actually brings. And if I was a hardware 3 owner banking on this quantized model whenever Tesla solves for AI 4, I would also be slightly encouraged. If this fundamental rewrite opens up material extra headroom for AI 4, then why can't it do the same for hardware 3? So at the end of the day, while this compiler and runtime major rewrite are not flashy new features, it might be the very change that actually allows for the new flashy customer-facing features. And the truth is, over the past decade, Tesla has been very tight-lipped about anything technical when it comes to the compiler and runtime. And so I do find it to be somewhat of a signal that they're now specifically calling it out. So listen guys, obviously I'm not a machine learning engineer, but with the beauty of the internet, I can now read and learn from those machine learning engineers to start to understand how they talk about things like the compiler and runtime. And through that process, you begin to understand all of the very critical aspects that happen through that part of the pipeline. And my understanding is that it really is a very fundamental, deep-seated part of the process that Tesla just rewrote from scratch. So naturally, Tesla's not going to want to implement a bunch of new features with this first version of the rewrite. Once Tesla gets more real-world data and feedback and they start to feel confident about the new compiler and runtime, then I think we start to see more fireworks, if you will, and more of those flashy customer-facing features that we all want. And I know plenty of you are sick and tired of being told to be patient, and I will say, if we don't get some fireworks here in the next 3 months through the end of June, then I myself will also be a bit disappointed. And many will recall when Elon said that 14.3 was not a small update. Right now, plenty of people are mocking Elon for hyping 14.3 because the real world results are not what many were hoping for. But I really do hope that brief segment on the compiler and the runtime and ML/IR and the rewrite can begin to paint a picture of why Elon is justified in saying 14.3 is a big update, even if the real world performance and some of these new features have not been delivered yet. I do believe this is a big step and a setup for what we've all been waiting for. So I really do see what Elon is saying here. 14.3 is the last big piece of the puzzle, and now with this extra headroom and with the extra efficiency and with the faster iteration speeds and with the more detailed and easier debugging, Tesla can start to add the final smaller pieces of the puzzle. Now I'm going to very quickly run through my biggest takeaways after watching and reading nearly every bit of 14.3 content over the past 24 hours. Multiple folks have said the decisiveness in parking lots is now much faster and more confident, but I've seen that the parking is still not perfect. Although overall, it does seem to be improved at least slightly. There have been some anecdotes that FSD is now doing better at reading signs, but it's certainly not perfect, as David Moss had his version go right through a do not enter one-way street from a parking garage, and another user had it park in a reserved for principal spot. Holmars had 14.3 throw up the red hands as if a camera was occluded when in reality it was not. He said when he pressed the accelerator, the car continued to follow the driving path. It was still able to drive, but it refused to recover from the red hands on its own. Again, the first version of a new release is often buggy. We have to be patient. A big shout out to Spencer and David Moss, by the way. Right when it dropped, they were doing all kinds of videos and giving some awesome feedback, so I wanted to tip my cap to them. And many folks have said it's the smoothest and most confident version ever. But at a drive-thru, it wasn't perfect. It actually took off before they got all of their food, although it was right after David said thank you, so that may be part of the problem. They did get stuck in an infinite loop in a parking garage. Police hand signals were hit or miss. I've heard a few people, including Sawyer, say that they're still having navigation problems. Chuck said camping on the highways in the left lane is back. And Chuck also said that in light rain, FSD was forcing him into chill or sloth mode only, meaning he was forced into that mode and he could not override it. Here's the video proof of 14.3 going out the wrong way through this do not enter, ignoring that sign. And as Spencer and David were testing, the reaction time of 14.3 does seem to be quite incredible. Again, thank you new compiler and thank you new runtime. In fairness, Dirty Tesla did have a video where it looked like 14.3 actually read a do not enter sign and did not follow the navigation, meaning in some cases it might be reading signs, but clearly it's not perfect. For now, it looks like the new parking feature where you get this blue pin with a P in the parking lot is really just a prediction of where the car is going to park at the end destination. At least for now, as far as I've seen, you cannot change or adjust it. And unfortunately, it seems like FSD is trying to park closer to the entrance, which would make sense, but plenty of us actually like to park farther away from other cars and swinging doors, carts, etc., which is not yet an option, but remember, foundation. But for now, Dirty Tesla did say that it can easily get stuck in a loop looking for parking close to the building if it can't find a spot. In short, the navigation might be better, but it's still not perfect. The parking lot behavior might be better, but it's still not perfect. Same thing when it comes to the ability to read signs. I'm hearing a lot of people say the speed profiles seem largely unchanged, but really, should we expect to perceive all of the changes within 24 hours of a few people having the release? I don't think that's totally fair. But again, for me, even without a major rewrite like we covered, I'd still be waiting for 14.3.2 or .3 to really understand what this model is going to be capable of. And now, after my research, that sentiment is even stronger, expecting some big things to come here in the next few weeks and months with those foundational rewrites. So just remember all those people out there right now that are saying 14.3 is a joke, it's a letdown, it's yet another big hype session and not actually delivering. To all of those folks, I would say, not so fast. Let's just wait and see what Tesla delivers with dot releases. Joe Tetmeyer shared some new video footage from Austin saying he saw about 60 Cybercabs in the outbound lot. Now, he did say it looks like they have white seats, but he later confirmed it might just be the glare from the sun. But he did say they still clearly have visible steering wheels. So, of course, there is plenty of chatter and debate taking place right now, but I would like to clarify that these are very clearly all engineering vehicles. They all have that marking and decal on the doors. So everyone is going to interpret this however fits their narrative, that's to be expected. But for me, a higher volume of cars like this with a steering wheel, that is from the Cybertruck by the way, is actually an encouraging sign that they're going to be sending these Cybercabs across the country, most likely in different places, to do more testing and validation. So all that to say, very obviously, these are not final production variants. And as I said, I think this is primarily what we'll see for most of April. Engineering vehicles, a lot of testing, a lot of validation. And yeah, I'd say upon review by myself, these are not white seats, it's just the glare from the sun. And I won't go through all of the release notes. I think most of you here have seen them by now. I'll have them on the screen if not, so you can pause, screenshot, and read if you'd like. But one thing I did want to call out, a lot of people seem to be disappointed that Tesla is actively improving the driver monitoring system. But for me, there's a very easy explanation, and it's NHTSA. They have been very adamant that Tesla continue to develop this system for as long as it's still in a technically supervised state, which is exactly where we are. And further, don't forget about the rest of the world, like Europe, that will need supervised FSD hopefully here very soon. So it's really at the behest of regulators that Tesla continues to develop the driver monitoring. And further, some people are mistakenly saying that reasoning has only been added to destination behavior, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case. Ashok said earlier this year, some elements of reasoning like navigation route changes during construction and parking options have already shipped in 14.2. More and more reasoning will ship in Q1. And let's not forget, part of the reason we're seeing these navigation problems is because Tesla has added parts of the reasoning to the navigation. So Ashok specifically called out during construction, but I think it actually goes further than that. So this upcoming improvement, expand reasoning to all behaviors beyond destination handling. I do think there are bits of reasoning dispersed across the whole model. It's just primarily in 14.3, it was focused on destination parking. So for those that have only been focused on the driving performance of 14.3 so far, I do really understand your disappointment. I think the expectations were so high, and so far the overall tone of everybody I've been listening to is that it's okay, it's very smooth, there are some improvements, but there's still a lot that needs to be worked on. But I really hope that you now understand that really is not the main part of the narrative, at least it shouldn't be at this stage. The real story here is this massive rewrite that Tesla just did with 14.3 that again should in theory unlock everything we've been waiting for. Now yes, Tesla still has to deliver, it's not going to be easy, but it's the piece that is required to enable Tesla to make it happen. Intel announced it's proud to join the Fab project with SpaceX, xAI, and Tesla to help refactor silicon fab technology. Our ability to design, fabricate, and package ultra-high performance chips at scale will help accelerate Terafab's aim to produce 1 terawatt per year of compute to power future advances in AI and robotics. It was fun hosting Elon at Intel this past weekend. The new CEO of Intel as of Q1 last year, Lip-Bu Tan, said Elon has a proven track record of reimagining entire industries. This is exactly what's needed in semiconductor manufacturing today. Terafab represents a step change in how silicon logic, memory, and packaging will get built in the future. I know that it's a bit too soon for most people to be excited about Terafab. We need to see some movement with Robotaxi first. But for now, I will say this is a big de-risk when it comes to Terafab, in my opinion. Now Tesla has a partner with some actual experience in this realm and a footprint of manufacturing, and a company that is 1, getting money from the government, and 2, has been refocused very strongly on its foundry division. And I think that first piece matters because Intel, as an American company, means our government desperately wants it to succeed. And don't forget, the Department of Commerce has already awarded Intel nearly $8 billion in direct funding through the US CHIPS Act. But the real reason I shared it was because that grant was later restructured into an investment from the US government into Intel as an equity stake. right here, the US government to make a nearly $9 billion investment in Intel common stock as the company builds upon its more than $100 billion expansion of resilient semiconductor supply chain, which obviously reflects the confidence the Trump administration has in Intel to advance key national priorities and the critically important role the company plays in the semi industry. The $8.9 billion investment is in addition to the $2.2 billion in CHIPS grants Intel has received to date, making for a total investment of $11.1 billion. Lip Bhutan said, as the only semiconductor company that does leading-edge logic, R&D, and manufacturing in the US, Intel's deeply committed to ensuring the world's most advanced tech are American-made. So yes, the US government owns a 9.9% stake in Intel. But they said the government's investment in Intel will be passive ownership with no board representation or other governance or information rights, which is great. The government also agrees to vote with the company's board of directors on matters requiring shareholder approval with limited exceptions. All that to say, yes, the American government is going to do whatever it can to ensure that Intel succeeds so its investment succeeds, and of course, indirectly, that's going to benefit SpaceX AI and Tesla. So not only does this de-risk the Terafab project, but I'm actually excited to look into Intel as a public company because they'll most likely be supplying some of their most advanced manufacturing tech to ensure that the Terafab gets started on the right foot. But for now, we don't really have any detail in terms of factory setup or what specific roles each company will actually play. So this partnership really does make a ton of sense, even beyond just the American ties and the supply chain securing and all of that. But Intel desperately needed a high-profile client specifically for its fab and foundry division. And of course, Elon and the Terafab are the perfect high-profile partners. But we'll talk about this much more in the weeks and months ahead. Not a soul should be surprised about this one, but Vanda Research said that over the last few days, Tesla stock has seen $256 million in retail inflows. This over the past 5 days, that reflects strong conviction from the Tesla retail community. By comparison, demand to buy other names in the Mag 7 has cooled. So there are certainly some disillusioned Tesla stockholders who may no longer be taking Elon's advice to buy the dip, but clearly plenty still are. Waymo has now officially opened to the public in Nashville, Tennessee. The initial geofence is 60 square miles, and they said they're currently testing at Nashville International Airport and intend to serve travelers there in the near future. So truly awesome for Waymo. Love to see them expanding. Would love to see them turn a profit at some point, genuinely. But No Safe Words did find this video from yesterday, April 7th, in Nashville. And as you'll see, some new asphalt was being laid. The workers were trying to keep the Waymo off it. It went right around the worker and right onto the asphalt. But 99.9% of people will never know about it. And sure, not the worst thing we've ever seen, not overly dangerous, but certainly suboptimal. And if it was Tesla, well, you know the rest. Now, yes, we already got Tesla's global sales data for Q1, but there might be a big recovery underway in Germany. The month of March was the best month ever. But more importantly, this end of quarter surge suggests a strong recovery trend, with Q1 2026 volumes already representing about 66% of Tesla's total registrations for all year 2025. Said another way, in one quarter, Tesla's already sold about 2/3 of its total volume in Germany from last year. Now sure, it could just be an export anomaly for 1 month, but certainly encouraging and something to watch. Tesla AI Girl spotted a great looking Tesla Semi out in the wild with the Watt EV and the Amazon trailer on the back. Of course, I'm a big fan of that color scheme, but it's certainly going to be fun seeing these out on the roads. Elon said this afternoon only a few hundred Model S and X cars left in inventory. Order now if you want one. Tesla stock closed the day at $343.25, down 0.98%, while the NDX was up 2.9%. The volume was 24% above the average. One minor request: if you guys do get any value from the video, I would appreciate it greatly if you could take a second to actually like the video. It might seem like a super minor thing, but for the algorithm, it's actually quite a big deal. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.